I started to say that there's 3 different stackings, not just one. So one is based on the order of our 3 types, order of dominance. The next is the proportion. Like, do we have a tall pattern and one that's like 10%? And thinking of how it adds up to a total number. And the third is what we mentioned, the identification. Are we positively, negatively, or neutral about each type and subtype? So those stackings apply to both. A lot of people thought it was only for the instincts in the very beginning. They didn't realize when I found stacking, it was for everything. We stack our tritypes. We stack our Myers-Briggs types. There's the type we use the most and the least. And when you find out all of them, you understand more. The other question is very common, and that is, does trauma make it so we change type? Or do we have an adaptation because of trauma where we're not our type? And then when we feel more secure, we become our type. The first thing I would say is we never change our type. It just means we haven't found it yet because of trauma. But what we did with the trauma and different types of trauma has a whole lot to do with our instinctual stacking and our tritype stacking. Did you stay passive? Did you become aggressive? Why? How? What triggered it? Again, why? And go ahead, Spencer. What would you say about trauma?
Trauma impacts our relationship with an external stimuli and how we internalize it. So that's how we might not recognize a need, even though our stacking suggests that it is secondary, if not primary. The main reason we focus on why versus what is learned. What is what the earth, our lives have taught us. In the end, we want to experience as little pain as possible. We want to get our needs met. And what does one do if having a need is not going to get met, or even worse, is dangerous to make known? Oh, we will do some mental gymnastics in our brains so quick. And it's like, oh yeah, no, I don't need that. Like, blah, 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 blah. Since when? Aren't you a human on this earth? Right? Like, that's like exactly how we work. The ego's job, right? The thing that dispenses our defense mechanisms, its job is to protect our idealized self. This version of ourself that we hope we would be in a scenario we've never experienced, or tell ourselves that we are at a certain, frequency in ones that we have. Now, we still want to see ourselves ideally, but we can only ideally be that if we're getting certain needs met. So we have to change what we think we need to the point where we call it a fact. And then that can absolutely throw us off in terms of our own need. And then we construct our strategies, our understandings off of incorrect information, lacking information. So this could be very, very impactful. And I cannot stress that enough. It's the main thing I focus on in my work as a therapist with Enneagram. Like, we might tell ourselves and we might mistype ourselves. We might get our stacking of our tritype and or subtype completely wrong because of how trauma can impact how we internalize an external stimuli that we then put in. So like, for example, I guess since we're on the topic of subtype, a sexual subtype who just grows up like really struggling to connect, and it's because they grew up with a really volatile parental unit that did not reflect safe connection, which then it's hard for us to believe that we could experience that. Right? What we see is what we believe for ourselves. There's a study with fleas in a jar. Put these fleas in a jar, and the adult fleas who have lived a life outside of this jar will start off jumping as high as they can, and they'll hit their head on the roof. Eventually, they will adapt so that they don't jump so high, so they don't hit their head, right? Survival. Well, the baby fleas who've never had a life outside of this jar will jump as high as they see their parents jump. They don't understand that the parents are doing that to not hit their head. Then you remove the jar and those baby fleas will still jump the height that the lid once was. Because unless we see it as a possibility, we can't see it as a possibility for ourselves. So it completely impacts how we structure that belief. So then we find what we think was love, which our parents showed us, or whatever the learning module was. And then we call that the feeding the bond. And then we fall into very similar patterns, most likely, as what we observed growing up.
And we adapt in extremes too, sometimes with those gymnastics.
So it's understanding like, oh, this is what I am, which struggles with this. This is what diagnosis I have, which struggle. Those will highlight. Here are my strengths as a blah blah. Here are the strengths of this diagnosis. Those will be magnified. Everything else in between will be some sort of inner conflict that we have to find a way to navigate.
Okay, in partnership, what does it feel like when you have an opposite stacking from your partner? You want to take that, Spence?
Sure. So at first, arguably very painful. This is a very common thing with the couples that I work with, because when you have opposite, you share the same secondary subtype, but what is your first is their third, and vice versa. So the thing that you need understood the most is the thing they understand the least. The thing you prioritize the most is what they prioritize the least. And very likely will define almost opposite in terms of whatever is getting, mistranslated in those moments. So at first it is really painful, let's just be honest, because there's just this total gap in understanding, which therefore, remember, the subtypes are about safety. Tritype, how you get to safety. Subtype, how you get safety. What do we want to feel in relationship? Safe, right? So it's really, really difficult how these relationships navigate without understanding of the Enneagram and tritype and subtype and all that stuff. They lean on that secondary tritype that they have in common. And what they might accidentally, fumble their way through is figuring out how to take care of each other's primaries real quick so that they can both drop down to the subtype that they both equally prioritize for the most part. I know there's like the bar graphs where my secondary subtype could have more of a value than your second, but you get the point. And so the ones that, accidentally figure it out, they're unknowingly like, okay, here's the trade-off, right? I will begrudgingly all the way to like, whatever, indifferently go with this thing that's really important to you that I just cannot for the life of me understand why that's so important. But you know what? You're important to me. So what's important to you is important to me. So we're just going to figure this out, right? That's how people fumble their way through it. When they have this information, they actually, so with my couples, I call this frenemies, right? One person speaking French, the other person speaking Chinese. Instead of getting each other to learn each other's language, you come up with a joint one where you meet in the middle and you understand the parts of each other's language and how to convert it into your own. And so you just tell yourself different things, right? You just explain to yourself like, okay, them doing this, which hits me like that, I'm going to call it different when it comes from this person. Because I understand in this context, this is how they mean it, which would be the equivalent of me doing blah, blah, blah. And then you can actually kind of not meet on the primary, but you can navigate together on the primary and then take care of the primaries, naturally drop to where you guys pair and then go from there. That has been my experience, both personally and professionally.
Yeah, perfect, Spencer. And another thing is a lot of times with couples, any type, they could be partners, business partners, parent, child, or your mate in terms of your spouse or your partner. But what we mistakenly do is we expect our partner to value what we value. So when you have this reverse situation, those that want their partner to read what they need. Let's say someone is a 2, for example, and they notice everything the person likes or needs, and then they're heartbroken that their partner doesn't know what to get them for their birthday or a holiday, Christmas or something. But I pay attention to what you need. Why don't you pay attention to what I need? And they want the person to naturally do that. And I have to teach them that if their partner is willing to do their third instinct, it's love, because no one wants to rank things differently. So if we do it, we're saying you matter, like Spencer said, the relationship matters. Now I'm going to stack these differently and think we need to pay attention to this more, but because you matter. And so a lot of couples, one or both partners, need to realize that doing something for their partners instinctual stacking is not giving in. It's showing you value the relationship. And as long as it's mutual and both partners are trying to do that, you can go, wow, this person hates doing that. So to do this means they really care about me because it's what I like. But you can't do it 100% of the time, because we unconsciously are tracking our own instinct. And another place people get confused, as I mentioned, is attachment. We all want a secure attachment. We don't get it. And your type, or your center in which your type is in, your lead type, can influence how you deal with attachment. And if you, some people, have the insecure attachment, so they're trying to get it. But other people who just didn't have the attachment, especially if they're a gut type, just learn to go without it. They're just not gonna be vulnerable that way. They're not going to engage. And that's what all gut types will do that don't have a secure attachment. They're not going to try and get the attachment. So they don't have the anxious attachments. They've given up. And they just don't expect they'll have it. But if you're a heart type, or you're a 6, or you have 6 in the tritype, you're going to keep trying because your security depends on that attachment. And this is important to understand. So the distant attachment is one way of surviving, and it could be due to your Myers-Briggs type. Like, if you're an INTJ, you're going to say, well, is it worth investing more in this? Or do I just make more time for doing things the way I want and become kind of ingenious about getting what you need indirectly, or getting your own time if that's the case? Or it can be that you might have a parent that has an insecure attachment and they want more of your time. Well, you're going to try and make that parent feel okay. But if you happen to have a T in Myers-Briggs, you're going to think, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I don't exactly feel what you're feeling. And the person that has the insecure attachment, that's the adult that has the F, they're trying to get you to feel what they feel, or they don't feel secure in their relationship with you. But the T will say what? Well, wait, no, let's just be logical. Let's just kind of map this out. But the F will just say, okay, what are you feeling? Okay, this is what I'm feeling. And the interesting thing, for example, another distinction between Spencer and myself is sexual 8s. He has the ENFP, so he knows what he's feeling from the time he was a little boy. Now, he did grow up with a mother that was saying, okay, we're going to talk feelings. I wasn't going to go through my adult life the way I went through my childhood, where feelings were just like, no, you can't have your feeling. What? But we're showing them anyhow. Don't we want to understand them? Well, no, it just wasn't the family system. But in Spencer's family system, of course, I promoted talking feelings. But at the time he's like 3-4 years old, he could totally describe his internal world. And I'm thinking, wow, because I couldn't do that even as an adult, because I didn't think that way. But here's the thing. The ENTP knows what everyone's feeling, but we don't want to feel it all. It's like an avalanche of feeling that we want to put more at a distance, but we don't know what we are feeling. And it's an interesting thing. That's what the ENFP gives to the ENTP, and the ENTP gives all the possibilities and the variables. So things can be very complementary or hard to understand. So when you look at attachment, anyone that needs secure attachment will think they're sexual. They'll choose their person they want to be attached to, and they don't want to let go of seeing themselves as sexual. But it's usually self-pres or social. Now, there are examples. There's exceptions to every rule. Would you add to that, Spencer?
I guess all I would really add, just, for sake of time, how we get to the secure attachment, which, keep in mind, attachment is relationship to relationship, both in specificity as well as a more broad lens. So we can have a secure attachment with our spouse and nobody else, all the way to we can have secure attachment in romantic relationships, but struggle with business. Right. And that's more of a, zoomed out lens. It depends on our perception of getting our needs met, our perception of what we would have to do to be seen, to be taken care of, whatever the case may be. And that has a lot to do with what we learned when our brain was developing. Just think about technology and children these days. Very quickly, they can just kind of figure it out, right? They just understand like that, just mechanical things work like that because their whole lives, like there's a photo, a still photo, put it in front of like a 1-year-old, and they'll start trying to do this because they know about phones, because that's what a picture is to them, right? Whereas like we had to like learn how to do that, and that confused us at some point, right? So imagine growing up while your brain was developing and was telling your primal needs, like how to, like what is safe, what is dangerous. You're going to take that all the way through your entire life until something or someone shows you that, at least with me or in this category, that does not apply. And then and only then do we switch up our strategies, our definitions, our insights, perspectives, whatever the case may be. So yeah, that's all I would really.
Yeah, that's really important, Spencer. And a major distinction is we are born with our instinctual stacking. We are born with our type stacking, or tritype stacking. But what happens along the way is where attachment shows up. So attachment is a secondary factor, but we're going to look at our losses or our experience through the lens of our tritype and the lens of our stacking. Like, is that important or not important?